Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Executive Virtual Roundtable. I'm Jeff Tockman. My company is the Referral Navigator. I'm a business development consultant, and I'm here today to be the moderator of a discussion about our new environment, especially with employers now having a lot of new employees working from home at working remote environment. And we're here to talk about it from really two important angles. One, the technology angle. Our host and our leader here is Jess Coburn from Applied Innovations, and our guest today is Ivelice Thomas. She has a background as an employment law attorney and now works as an HR consultant for companies. And so we have two great experts to help you as the business owner make decisions about leading your employees from home in this new environment. Jess, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit about your strengths as an outsourced IT consultant, some of the things that you do that are special.
Morning, Jeff. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Hear you great.
Fantastic. And if the people that are watching our stream, if they could just click a like on the video, that would be awesome. That would help us know that people are seeing this and that everything's coming through good. So I'm Jess Coburn, CEO of Applied Innovations. Applied Innovations is a company I started back in 1999 to help small and medium-sized businesses get the most out of their technology. At that time, we were really focused on web hosting and helping businesses go online. Over the last 20 years, though, our business has pivoted and changed. And today our focus is around the cloud, managed IT, and cybersecurity. Those are the areas we tend to help businesses. As businesses were looking to go remote, and even today are remote, they run into a lot of technical challenges that they need help with, and that's where we come in.
Thank you so much, Jess. I'll go now to Ivelice Thomas. Ivelice, good morning. How are you feeling today?
Good morning. I'm good. Thanks, Jeff.
Wonderful. I know you have a strong background as an employment law attorney, and you're helping a lot of companies with compliance-related issues in HR and training, having the employee handbooks and all their documentation in order. There are a lot of ways that you can prevent trouble down the road, preventative medicine, ounce of prevention, pound of cure kind of ideas. Tell us about some of your background and your strengths.
Absolutely. So after having spent several years as a practicing attorney and then subsequently in-house and as an HR executive for billion-dollar organizations, I found that there was definitely a void in that small to medium-sized business market and having the support and HR expertise that in order to remain compliant and manage their employees effectively. So a few years ago, I started HR and Beyond, and we specialize in supporting small to medium-sized businesses with those efforts, helping them remain compliant, helping them manage their employees, develop their supervisors, and just provide them with the resources that they need that they normally would not be able to afford since they don't have in-house HR support.
I was hoping you could maybe give us an example of one of your clients. If you could, maybe disclosing the details without the name or the name of a client you've worked with so people can get a handle on an example.
Absolutely. So we work a number of ways. I have a client that's a nonprofit organization where they did not have that in-house HR support. And it was cost effective for them to hire me on an ongoing basis as their consultant. So one of the first things I did was ensure that they were compliant with their practices, everything from recruiting to hiring to managing and terminating their employees and providing them with the policies that they needed, updated handbooks and processes for their employees to communicate effectively with their managers as well, provide training for their managers, establish toolkits, and then ultimately, on a day-to-day basis, as things arise, they're able to reach out to me for that ongoing support to answer questions. And sometimes you just need that second opinion to make sure that what you're doing as a business owner, as a manager, is correct and will not lead to expensive consequences. So I provide that level of support for them.
You mentioned a couple times the word compliant. There are obviously industry rules and regulations and government rules and regulations where companies have to be compliant. Can you give us a few examples when you say compliance? What are some things that are maybe more tangible for people to understand where they need to be in compliance? And if they're not in compliance, what are some of the risks and financial costs that they face?
Sure. We can start at the beginning, at the inception of the employment relationship. a lot of voids we see in appropriately even hiring employees. You'd be surprised that there are a lot of business owners that have no idea that there are hiring documentation that they're required to have for the employees that they have. One of those being, which is a very expensive consequence, is not having an I-9, which is verifying the eligibility for someone to work, that work authorization in the US. Those are very expensive. Those fines can add up anywhere from a couple of $100s to a few $1,000s per violation on the form, and for not even having the form for each employee. And they can go back several years to employees that are no longer even at working for you. So the simplest thing, even hiring an employee appropriately, there are a lot of small businesses, especially, or medium-sized businesses, that think that certain laws don't apply to them because they only have a small staff. But really, they're often just considering federal laws, which usually start at that 25 to 50 employee mark. But there are a lot of local laws, Miami-Dade County, Broward County ordinances that have requirements with respect to ensuring against discrimination in terminations. To me, the oddest one is in Dade County, there's an ordinance where your political affiliation is a protected class. So if you terminate someone based on their political beliefs, that's actually discrimination in Dade County. So that's why the documentation of reasons for termination and having handbooks that provide policies to justify terminations are important.
What are some of the mistakes that you see companies made? And maybe you can tell us some of the horror stories, if you will, about some of the consequences that you've seen companies face by not following these compliance rules.
Well, I would say with the smaller businesses, the most common that I see and have seen is employees or employers, business owners having what are truly employees, but treating them as independent contractors. I would say that is rampant both in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, where a lot of businesses make this decision, some of it based on misinformation, because they've heard things that somehow just become what people believe, that, if they're only working a few days a week, I can hire them as an independent contractor. They're not really an employee, or if they're only working X hours. And that actually has nothing to do with whether someone is an employee or an independent contractor. And in most cases, they are employees, because the legal definition and analysis that you go through to determine an independent contractor is a very strict standard, both by the IRS and the Department of Labor. And usually it's, you have to be, I'm an independent contractor, right? You're an independent contractor. Your clients are not controlling the hours that you work. They're not telling you when to show up. They're not telling you how to do your job. And in most cases, that's what these quote unquote independent contractors are. And they're truly employees. And normally what happens is you think as a business owner, everything is great. They want to be an independent contractor. They want to be paid cash. I don't have to pay, taxes and benefits. But I see it often blowing up, most often, where you have people working for a company for years. All of a sudden, they're no longer working there. What is the first thing someone does when they're no longer employed? They go apply for unemployment. Unemployment looks at the history and sees that this person there's been no taxes paid on behalf of this person that was truly an employee. And now you have a situation where, as a business, you are responsible to pay back the taxes, going back up to 5 years or more. And again, not just for this person, but every other person that it results in an audit that was truly an employee, but you were treating as an independent contractor. And that could be very costly.
Thank you. I'll bring up our first banner right now so we can start to see on the screen, for the benefit of our viewers, the topics that we're discussing. And we have a few banners prepared. I'll go back to you, Jess, first on this one, and then to you, Ivelice. It's on monitoring employees and tracking time. From the technology standpoint, Jess, maybe stepping back a bit before giving the answer here, what are some of the issues that you're seeing where companies that you're working with, your clients, need to now track and monitor employees' time and monitor the employees' activities online? maybe you can even give us an example.
So some of the questions we get, Jeff, are around, hey, can I see what they're sharing? Can I see what websites they're going to in the middle of the day? The monitoring software that a lot of our customers use is installed on their local computers within their office, and they're able to see that both from a compliance perspective as well as productivity perspective, and for the security of the information that they're sharing with their customers. When you go remote, those tools are still available, but a lot of the employees now are using their personal devices, and that starts to get into gray areas. And I know I just got a ton of things for Ivelice to talk about, just bring your own device, because in reality, that's what they're doing, is they're bringing their own device to their workspace, which is their home office. An application that we've used for a number of years is called WorkSnaps, and we love it because the employee actually has control of WorkSnaps, and they can control the screen snapshots that are sent back to the employer if they want. So if they're working on something they don't want them to see, or you maybe realized, oh my gosh, it's after hours and I still have this on, they can actually go in and block that out, and they get a little notification that lets them know. Now, as the employer and the person controlling the software, you can control that feature, but I like to leave that on. So that's one example.
Tell us about associated, to give us some scale. Let's say, take an example of an employer that has maybe 100 total employees, just for a nice round number. What are some of the costs associated with this monitoring software and time tracking software?
Well, that's just one. There's a number of different options out there, and the costs really run the gamut. That's the one that comes to mind because it's the one that we use on our own computers. There's 4 or 5 that we've used. Cost could be a couple of dollars a month per user to $1,000 a year. It really varies.
Thank you. And now I'll go to you, Ivelice. Tell us your thoughts on monitoring employees and then tracking time. What are some of the examples you can give us to help people understand the issues that they face and what they can do about it?
Well, and you'll hear me probably say this a lot with what we're talking about, it really starts with ensuring that as a business, you have policies that address remote working, and more specifically, that you're explicit about the company's ability to surveil while employees are working. Most often, with the larger clients I've had, especially when employees have company laptops, I've had employers that have disclaimers right on the laptop on a sticker, right? Notice that ensuring employees know that anything that is done in this computer is subject to surveillance and or review by the employer. But also having explicit policies that state that the computer is to be used only by the employee, especially now with us having everyone working from home or many working from home. It's not for you to give to your high school teenager to do their online learning. Because then I'm sure, Jess can talk about their security risk involved, right? As to what websites go on to and how the employer's information can be compromised. So it all starts with having a very clear policy on what the expectations are for the employee and putting them on notice as to what the employer's rights are with respect to the technology and what's in the technology. And in some cases, even prohibiting them from doing work on personal computers. I've had clients that do that as well, that mandate that company work only be done on company computers, also to ensure security. So from the monitoring employees perspective, policy is very important, as well as tracking time, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later with respect to issues that come up with having a remote workforce, but having the right technology to ensure that you can appropriately track time is important as well.
Tell us about maybe an example where you can give us where you've seen an issue where an employee wasn't tracking the time effectively. What was the consequence? What did they face financially, and what damage could it do to a company?
So we're getting into now really where you have a remote workforce that is including non-exempt employees. So your non-exempt employees are your hourly employees, right? Those that are eligible for overtime. When you have non-exempt employees that are working remote, there are a number of compliance challenges that go with that, which is why prior to this, you had a lot of businesses that were very resistant to allow remote work. One of those reasons being, one of the biggest reasons, is because as an hourly employee, as a non-exempt employee, it's required for you to be compensated for all work time, all compensable time. So what does that mean? If they're looking at an email on their phone, if they're responding to a text from their boss or from their supervisor or from a manager or from a coworker discussing anything work related, or that has to do with the furtherance of their task, that is compensable time. Now, as an hourly employee, are you really tracking that as thoroughly as you should? If you're at home and you have kids, you pick up your phone, you pick up your laptop, you go check on your child's online learning, right? It brings in a lot of difficulties. So now you're risking, from a DOL perspective, not compensating your employees for the appropriate compensable time, and or an employee to have been considered to working off the clock, which is prohibited and expensive. So tracking the time, having the right technology so that it can be done easily or seamlessly, that's on the computer, makes it a lot easier than expecting someone to write down every time that they're working. So technology really does play a role in it and can help. But there are a lot of challenges that go with it, whether it's, ensuring that they're not working overtime, ensuring that they've covered or captured all of their hours. It's very challenging with non-exempt employees.
I was going to ask you about your experience as an employment law attorney and what you know about employment law attorneys. So from the business owner's perspective, I'll illustrate the basic concept that even if it's a small dollar amount matter that you're facing with one employee, that there can be a lot of financial cost to that employer in dealing with that issue, having to do with covering the costs of the attorney. Can you elaborate on that and help employers understand a little bit that even with a small dollar amount matter that they can face some heavy costs?
Oh, absolutely. Well, just putting very simply, I mean, you can have a claim that may only be worth a few $1,000s in the end, right? When you have a matter that where an employee is eligible to back pay, right? For instance, because they weren't compensated for all work time, or you have employees that fail to appropriately compensate for required overtime or hours worked over 40, at least in Florida, because you have other states that allow for overtime over 8 hours worked in a day, but that's not here. But in any case, when you have those cases where you're talking about back pay, right? There's back pay, there's interest. In some statutes, employees are entitled to damages on top of that, penalties that are applied. So even let's say in your best case scenario, you only owe a few $1,000s, but once you hire an attorney, you can have a case that's worth a few $1,000s, but then on top of that, you have an attorney that's been representing you, whether it goes to trial or not. Now, on top of that, add the $20,000, $30,000 in attorney's fees, which is substantially more if you have an issue where you have to litigate it in court. So especially from the small businesses, I often recommend, look, if this is really worth the fight, then sure, litigate it. And there are attorneys that I refer matters to. But if this is something that you think that you can simply just pay what's owed and not have it lead to litigation, it is a lot more cost effective, because even if you win, right, and the employee was incorrect and or had no basis for the charge, you can still end up paying thousands of dollars just to even defend yourself.
Let me go back to you, Jess, about monitoring employees and tracking time. It seems that there are pros and cons. There may be a risk and a cost associated for an employer, a business owner, if they do monitor their employees, and then a risk and a cost if they don't. There's a risk and a cost if they do track time of their employees, and there's a risk and a cost if they don't. Maybe you could help us weigh the pros and the cons and how you're thinking about those things.
So, Jeff, the challenge becomes, how do I balance this, right? How do I balance the risk with the cost? And as a small business owner, that's always the challenge you have, is how do I balance it? How do I get the most juice for the squeeze, let's say? What I've seen a lot of businesses start to do is adopt remote desktop environments or even their VPN environments where they can. So with a remote desktop environment, you have a complete computer system in the cloud that you control, you manage. From a cybersecurity perspective, it's fantastic because it's its own little contained bubble, and you can decide what you let in and what you let out. For the workforce, we've seen a number of businesses adopt this type of environment using remote desktop or Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. And so that's what they're doing there. The other issue, and kind of taking it a little bit of it, and so what's nice, just, to talk about the tracking time, what's nice about that is you're able to monitor the activity within your environment because it's your desktop, just as if it were your environment in the office, assuming you have the right policies in place and, it's dictated in your handbook. But so that's really nice. The challenge that I see a lot of businesses struggling with is that there weren't laptops available to purchase. I mean, it dried up. You can't find webcams, you can't find, decent headsets, and you can't find laptops. So a lot of businesses were forced to let their employees use their home computers in those environments. And like Ivelice said, you're a little more restricted on what you can and can't do when it's their computer. So we make some recommendations for the employee. For example, use separate profiles for each user so that when your son's online doing his homework for his class, he's not using the same profile you're using. Minimize the ability for your users so that they don't have administrative access, so that these users can't install software. You don't want your son clicking a banner ad to get free Fortnite credits and then infecting your computer with some antivirus or some virus that you bring back to the rest of the organization. We also recommend that the businesses manage the cybersecurity on the employees' computers, with their permission so that they install the antivirus and they control the antivirus. A lot of home computers, they're running whatever antivirus came with the computer, and chances are they've never updated it. So that we see as a huge issue. Now, where this starts to become an even bigger problem is that businesses were forced overnight to go remote. And a lot of businesses just opened up the back door, if you will, so that the employees could come in. The problem with that is when you open the back door, not only your employees can come in, but anyone else can come in too. And they haven't adopted the right changes there. So we've seen a large increase in remote desktop ports being open to servers and desktops that are vulnerable on the internet. And the employer doesn't realize this. They just open up that port and let anyone in, and now they're completely vulnerable, and they're going to get hacked if they don't monitor that and manage that. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent.
Not at all. I was asking, let me ask a follow-up. There are a lot of companies that may be smaller companies, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 employees perhaps, that even have their own internal IT person. I know that you can work hand in hand with those IT people and or sometimes replace them. What are some of the things that a business owner would be thinking about? John Smith or Jane Smith, they own their company. They have a person on their team that's working on their IT. How should they think about bringing someone new in to work with them or instead of them?
So that becomes a bit of a challenge, right? Because when on-site IT see, the boss is bringing in this guy, he doesn't trust me, he doesn't think I know what I'm doing. They get defensive and they start to think mine, leave my baby alone. This is mine. This guy doesn't know our environment. Our environment's unique. Our business is unique. The fact of the matter is all these businesses are the same. The challenges are the same. But we like to work with on-site IT because it frees them up from the day-to-day grind where they're being too busy and too tactical and not strategic for the company. We like to see the on-site IT looking at the business with that deep understanding that only they have, going, hey, you know what? We should really leverage this ERP system for our environment. And now that I'm not dealing with Mary and accounting's Outlook issues, I can address that. Now that I don't have to sit there and spend hours sifting through the firewall logs and the VPN logs and ensuring that we have the right security updates and the right things managed, I can focus on that. And that's really the benefit that I see for outsourced IT when you have an on-site IT staff. Now, the thing a lot of people don't like to talk about and where outsourcing starts to get the evil eye in the ear of everybody is the replacement factor. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of businesses are looking at that and looking at their IT expenses going, hey, I need to reduce my costs. And there's a lot of things they can do where they can still leverage outsource IT and still leverage their internal IT teams. And it doesn't have to be a replace. It certainly can be a replace, but it doesn't have to be.
Thank you. Let me bring up the next banner to take a look at, and that is, what are the top issues related to employment law that employers should know today? I think we touched on a couple of them, but I wanted you, Ivelice, to expand upon that. What are your thoughts about, the employer, Jane or John out there? What should they be thinking about?
Well, we talked a lot about remote work, which is big now, and it has its own challenges from a compliance perspective. We talked mostly about the non-exempt employees, but with exempt employees, there are also compliance challenges because in order to maintain that exempt status, you cannot, for a salaried employee, in essence, control the hours, or you should not control the hours that they're working or the number of hours like you would an hourly employee. When you're doing those things, like trying to set a stop time or how much time, you are putting at risk that exempt status, right? Because normally they're in any workplace, they're just being paid that 40 hours a week. And in most cases, they're working a lot more than 40 hours a week and they don't get overtime, and that's why they're exempt. So you have those types of issues, but having policies right now is one of the most important things for any business. And actually more so now for small and medium-sized businesses that weren't previously accustomed to having so much legislation that they need to manage. And now they do. With the passing of the Family First Coronavirus Act, FFCRA now imposes upon small businesses even, one employee, right, to offer emergency sick leave and subject to expanded Family Medical Leave Act, which previously, if you weren't a business that had 50 or more employees, you didn't have to worry about any type of federally mandated leave. And COVID has now required for these small businesses to understand how employees are entitled to this, not only time off, but paid time off, and how to manage that. What are the requirements? How to know if an employee is entitled to it? What are the reasons in which an employee can and request to have this time off and it be paid? The fact that you cannot deduct an employee's existing sick time because this is a completely separate paid time off entitlement that the federal government has now enacted. And how do you manage that? Do you have a policy that says how people ask for the time, how it's going to be granted? How are you going to track the time separately than you would normal time off? Those are big issues that are impacting small, medium-sized businesses. And even so, they're dealing with the fact in some cases you have employees that if you're operating now, are thinking about, do I go to work and put myself at risk and my health at risk? Or since my kid is home, do I just stay home with my kid and activate emergency sick leave and expanded FMLA and get paid 2/3 my salary no matter what for at least 12 weeks? Those are big issues that employers are now dealing with and having to manage, which are completely new to everyone now.
We are about at our halfway mark. We're going to be ending this call at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Jess, I wanted to take a little break here in the middle to talk about.
That's quite the break, Jeff.
I was hoping it wasn't my computer. It seems like he froze.
Yeah, I think he did.
Okay.
Ivelice, while we wait for Jeff to come back from being froze, you made a comment just now about the employees and how the new changes affect the employees. Now, are those changes just related to COVID-19, or does that carry over for any sickness? No,
it's specifically related to COVID-19, but it's challenging in that one of the challenges of administering these leaves is that as an employer, with traditional FMLA, as an employer, you're entitled to request medical documentation to make sure that it falls within the categories. With these emergency leaves, as an employer or as an employee, you're not required to provide a doctor's note saying that you have symptoms of COVID, right? It's literally, I'm telling you I have symptoms of COVID, or that I've been exposed to someone that has been diagnosed with COVID. And you have to take it at face value as an employer. So that creates challenges. And, the federal government did that specifically because they didn't want to further tax, the medical industry who's dealing with this rampant pandemic. But, it creates a lot of challenges. But it is COVID related. But this law right now is still in effect. You're back, Jeff. This law is in effect, at least based on current legislation, until the end of the year. So you're talking about till at least December. Employers will be dealing with this, and employees will have these rights to utilize the protection in these acts. And similar to FMLA, if I use this leave, you can't hold it against me. You are required to provide me my job back if it's still available. So it's going to be challenging. And I think especially as businesses start to reopen and employees are forced with trying to make this decision, do I make more money on unemployment now with this additional $600 that's been added to unemployment? And that also goes to the end of the year. Am I making more money staying at home than working the hourly job I was working? Am I good with making 2/3 of my salary and I'm staying home with my child for a good 12 weeks? These are decisions that employees now will have the right to make, and employers will have to maneuver around them.
And that's going to be a challenge, right? If you're all right, I don't know. Well, I'll just shut up. It sounds like I've got a lot of Back to you, Jeff.
Thanks. When I lost my internet connection temporarily there, I was asking you, Jess, about the executive virtual roundtable that we're doing, a little bit of a bigger picture. And then if you could elaborate a little bit about the broadcasting that we're doing. We're broadcasting it to a few different sites. If you could be clear, and then maybe make a request for people to participate, like and share and comment, and even send us chats that we can answer during our call. Maybe I missed that, but if you could elaborate on that, Jess.
All right. So what he said, but yeah, so we're doing these roundtables, these panel discussions. We've set up a series of them. We're doing them at least every 2 weeks. We were shooting for every 1 week, but there's a lot of work involved with setting this up, believe it or not. And so we're looking at every 2 weeks. We've sent it out on YouTube, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. And you can actually comment and please like the videos on YouTube and Facebook, so that we know that you can hear it and everything's going on. But you can leave a comment and a question in the comments, and we'll see those questions here, and then we're able to respond to them. And Jeff, I think we actually have a couple of comments.
Fantastic. Yeah, if you wanted to bring those in, go right ahead, Jess.
Well, Herb gave you an LOL. I guess that's when you disconnected. But
Thanks, Herb.
But Trinity had a question. How would an employer prove they had COVID-19 if testing's still limited? Do they have to have a medical letter to get sick pay?
Yeah, and the answer to the question is they don't have to have the medical letter, and they really don't even have to prove it. It's simply, and everyone knows what the symptoms are, right? They're highly publicized. I call my employer and say, I have a fever and it's been maintained. I did telemedicine and they're telling me I am likely, I'm symptomatic to COVID, right? That in and of itself is sufficient. And as an employer, you have to take it at face value and offer the time, because a medical note is not required.
All right. And then another question we had was from Linda. What are your thoughts about offering employees flexibility? So flexible, if you're able to track their works and it fits their role. Are there any compliance considerations with flex hours?
So I think employers should be flexible in this time because, like we've talked about, you have parents that are trying to, especially that are trying to juggle their work responsibilities and the fact that they now have their children home for the rest of the school year, myself included. So it's a challenge. So as an employer, you do want to be flexible because it's a challenging time and it's stressful to your employees, right? And a lot of people are talking about the mental health of the workforce, which is important. Now, with your non-exempt employees, though, you want to be flexible, but you still want to have structure because you want to be able to really minimize the potential of having your non-exempt employees work off the clock and or not document all of their hours. So the way that I recommended and have recommended for clients to do that with their non-exempt employees is speak to them about what makes sense for them, right? So, for instance, if your child is, they need hands-on assistance with their schooling from 7:30 to 11 o'clock, then coordinate with your employer that, okay, so you can start at 11:30, and I know that from 11:30 to 3:30, you're working and you're focused on that. And then if you need to start again and take a break and then block off another few hours, you can do that. So I'd say yes, definitely be flexible, but still provide some structure so that you're still maintaining some semblance of control and protecting yourself from liability.
I'll bring up the next banner now, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, new paid leave requirements. I think you'd already touched on that. Is there something else you can add? Maybe an employer wants to think about how that applies to them, or even, of course, on the employee side. What can you add to that, Ivelice?
So I guess what I can add to that is it's important for employers also to understand that the way that this was all crafted was for it technically to not come out of the employer's pocket, but for employers to be reimbursed via a tax credit. So, meet with an accounting professional if you don't have one so that you understand how to apply the tax credit so that you're reimbursed for any time that is allotted for this. That's why it's important as well from a tracking perspective that you track this time differently, right? So that you can ensure that you are being reimbursed for the costs associated with employees taking time based on these paid leave requirements. And also understanding that for the different categories, employees are compensated for different times. So as I mentioned, if it is reason based on, let's say, one of the categories is if your children are home, right, because schools are closed, or you're caring for someone else, maybe that is symptomatic or has COVID, you're only entitled to 2/3 of your pay under those categories, right? But if it's based on yourself, self-care, you have symptoms, you have been diagnosed, you are subject to a quarantine, then you're entitled to receive your full pay for these days that you are taking as leave. And the other important note that is different than any other leave that was available prior to this was the fact that this applies to part-time employees too. So it's important for employers to understand this isn't just a full-time benefit. This applies to part-time employees. The sick leave applies to anyone who's been with you even one day at work, which is different as well. They don't have to have been with you for a year. They don't have to have been with you for any period of time. It's just one day. But for the Extended Family Leave Act, which is the additional 10 weeks, the person has to have been employed with you for at least 30 days before they're eligible for the time.
Next up on the banner is about telework policy. I'll go to Jess, and perhaps you'd like to make a statement, and then maybe even you can pose a question to Ivelice a little bit more detailed about telework policies. Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, you need one. That's my recommendation there. So there's a ton of policies. We've been sharing a number of different policies that we have that are kind of boilerplates to get you started. But the biggest thing with any policies like that, and small business owners are the worst at this. I think people in the IT space especially, they're just like, hey, can I get your policy? Can I get your handbook? They don't know if that handbook's been built out for their business and is right for their business or not. That was one of the things that we did early on, but was invaluable to my company, was to actually work with an HR attorney. We worked with Diane and build our employee handbook to our business. We started with a boilerplate handbook a long time ago when we first started the company and hired our first, I think it was when we hired our third and fourth employee. did we actually get our handbook in place. And then as we grew as a company, we worked with, our employment attorney to really build out our policy, our handbook, and our policies. And over the years, as our business has changed, our policies have changed. So we started doing work from home on Fridays probably 3 years ago, and our policies needed to change. A year and a half ago, we took the team to full-on remote work from home, and our policies had to change. Now we've got employees that are looking at the possibility of relocating, and now we're going, okay, well, our policies are going to have to change again. But I'm curious from Ivelice, what are the policies that, as a business, that you just sent all your employees home, are the things that you need to scramble and really address today?
Absolutely. And I love what you said, because first off, in piggybacking on what you said about, it's so important for you to have policies that are specific to your business. I find that one of the biggest mistakes small business owners, even medium-sized business owners, make is that they manage HR via Google, right? And I love Google myself. I will Google anything. But when you have liability for your company, managing HR via Google is not the best answer. So really working with an employment attorney similar to how you all have, and consultants like myself, I like to tell my clients they get the benefit of the legal mind without having to pay that legal fee, right? Because I am an attorney by trade. But having a telework policy, again, that establishes the standard of, number one, how employees are expected to work, how they're expected to report what they're working, the technology piece, right? The use of technology, so the security features that we've talked about, and expectations, hours of work expectations, like I said, reporting all hours worked, especially for your non-exempt employees, that the employer has the right to determine what roles are appropriate for telework and what roles are not, because one of the challenges that I have been advising my clients to be cautious of is that when you're deciding who works, right, it really should be jobs-based, not people-based, because you run the risk of now dealing with possible discrimination issues or just the impact of discrimination, because let's say you're only looking at particular people, but you can have a workforce and disproportionately your older employees now aren't being allowed to work from home, or your Hispanic employees, or whatever it may be, protected classes. That is still valid. So having objective criteria and determining that the employer is the one that makes that determination is important to have in the policy. And I'm also recommending that current policies have a disclaimer that certain exceptions may be made due to the current pandemic as to which positions are able to work from home. Because what's going to happen, especially as businesses reopen, is that everyone is going to want to continue, or many are going to want to continue working from home. And for some businesses, that may be feasible to continue, and they're seeing that they can still keep productivity. But for others, they're going to want to get to some semblance of normalcy. So they need to have that ability to have very clearly that this may not continue forever. You may not be able to work from home forever.
Let me bring up another banner here, and that's based on the idea of what's becoming more and more popular over the last several years, and I think exponentially rising today, the use of outsourced virtual assistants, both virtual assistants that could be domiciled here in the US, and of course, virtual assistants that are in other countries, like in India or in the Philippines or other countries. What are your thoughts about how these rules and regulations and policies apply when a business owner is using a virtual assistant in another country?
Well, I don't know that many of these are necessarily applying to virtual assistants, as long as there is the clear distinction that as a virtual assistant, either they are their own independent business, right? They have an EIN number. If we're talking just individual EIN number, they work for other clients. They're not solely working for you. That you're mutually agreeing on the availability and the time worked, so that virtual assistant is still maintaining some semblance of control, right, of when they work, how they work based on a mutual agreement. So making sure they're still functioning in that independent contractor capacity rather than as an employee that you're only working for me in my business and these are the hours that you're working and then I'm going to tell you what to do, right? Because now you're an employee, you're not a contractor. And the same thing, you have a lot of now, virtual assistants have become very popular where you'll have virtual assistants that work for a company, right? So as long as the virtual assistant is an employee of that company, then also now you're not running afoul of having someone that is your employee. They are employed. It's like temp workers, right? Where you have temp that have these workers that are employees of the agency and they are assigned or contracted to employers. So maintaining that same type of relationship is what will keep you, from running afoul of any type of compliance issues.
So I think what you're saying is if you do have people that could be classified as regular employees here in the U.S., it's almost irrelevant as to what country they live in. Can you clarify that a little bit?
I'm not sure with respect to employees working in other countries because I have not worked in that area. So I'd be curious as to exactly the application, but I would find it difficult to apply U.S. law to someone that is working out of the U.S., right? So, and I think that's why I know of a few people that have used a virtual assistants and even IT that's abroad. But can you apply the U.S. law to employees that are working abroad? I'm not sure.
So, Jeff and Ivelice, the concept of using offshore employees is great when you look at it at face value, but when you start to think about data breach, compliance, and cybersecurity, it starts to lose some of that luster. Mm-hmm. The laws like GDPR could impact your employee there and have ramifications back to your business here. Some of the compliance requirements require you to have a US-based employee. Some of our contracts with some of our customers require that only US-based employees and employees that are US citizens even work on their services and have access to their data. So you want to look at that. The other thing you want to be careful about is data breach and again, security. When they remote in, if they're working from, say, what do they call it, an internet shop, and not maybe from a home office, or if they're working on an insecure network. I mean, the cybersecurity that's available in some of these other countries where these workers speak fantastic English and have really good skills, but that cybersecurity isn't up to the par that we would expect for a company here. So you really have to be careful with that. In a lot of cases, what I've seen a lot of IT companies do is they control that. They go in, they set up their own shop, they set up their own employees, and they use their own infrastructure there. The costs are still less, but now they're able to at least ensure that security is there. We see a lot of the outsourced IT companies doing that.
We go to our next topic. It's already on the screen. As governments start to looking at reopening businesses, how will things change? We're, of course, hearing a lot of mixed messages in the media, talking about shutting down immigration, yet at the same time opening up businesses, sort of contradictory messages from our own government. So it's a confusing time, and the people making decisions about, opening up the economy to save the economy, yet people balancing that against the lives that would be saved by closing down the economy. Yet, of course, back on the other side, that lives can be lost from violence, starvation, suicide because of the closing down of the economy. So it's not a lives to economy issue. But tell us your thoughts, Ivelice, from the employer's perspective. What should they be thinking about in terms of how to make a decision about reopening their business? What should they prepare?
Well, first, I think that I understand that this has been a challenging time for businesses, and people are very anxious. A lot of businesses are anxious to reopen. But businesses really need to ask themselves, are they ready, right? Because this is the time that they really need to prepare to service customers and or have employees and what our new reality is going to be, because COVID is not going away for some time. So while the government may reopen or allow businesses to reopen, the same risks are here that were here 5 weeks ago when the decisions were made to shut down businesses or to begin to shut down businesses. So are you ready as a business to understand the new realities of making sure that your employees feel safe about working? Are you taking precautions? Are you going to be providing them with protective equipment, protected wear? Are you going to have sufficient cleaning supplies in order to continuously keep your work environment clean? Are you going to have policies to that effect? You really need to have policies as to what your standards are going to be, the standards you're going to hold to your employees. Are you going to require that they wear a mask? Are you going to require cleaning at a certain period? How are you going to keep them safe from customers? Are you going to employ distancing standards, and how are you going to enforce those? There's so many things in play that need to be considered with any business that's reopening. So knowing what your plan is, and then documenting that in a policy that you can communicate and train your employees on, because they're going to have to learn to service your business differently, both to provide comfort to themselves and to your customers. So it's a lot of preparation that's involved. And I think that businesses need to be prepared for it. And on top of that, there are consequences and will be consequences for businesses that aren't focused on their employee safety. I'm one of those people that strongly believes that you are going to see an increase in union organizing activity, because when you think about, and you're already hearing it with Amazon, with Whole Foods, businesses that are open now, that where employees haven't felt safe in the way that they've been conducting business. But when you think about the inception of unions, and my prior, when I was an attorney, I did a lot of labor work, but unions were started based on fighting for employee safety, right? Safety at work. And there's no more relevant topic right now that's going to be front and center, which is employee safety at work. And those businesses that are not keeping their employees safe and employees don't feel safe, those employees are going to go to a third party to fight for them and to speak up for them. So as a business owner, be that advocate, be that voice, and make sure that you're providing a work environment and preparing your employees for what the new reality will be.
Thank you so much. We're coming towards the last several minutes of our StreamYard presentation here and the executive virtual roundtable. So let's get into review mode and wrapping up and talking a little bit more about each of your businesses. I think there are probably going to be people who are watching this broadcast and thinking that they're going to maybe feel overwhelmed by the amount of issues that we just covered in such a short time, and feeling maybe like throwing their hands up. But there are going to be other people, of course, that we'll be speaking to who are saying, let me reach out and talk to Jess. Let me reach out and talk to Ivelice about these issues and try to get some help. So going towards wrap up mode and how to get in contact with you and the kind of people that should contact you. Let me go with you, Jess, first. What are your thoughts about that? What have we covered so far? What do you think an employer out there who's business owner out listening to this should be doing going forward?
Well, I think it's a great time to sit down and look at your policies. You want to look at your employment policies. You also want to look at your IT policies and make sure that you're set up correctly for the new and or the new norm, because this is where we're going to be at. As far as getting in touch with us, we're Applied Innovations. It's applied.net, or on our Facebook and the YouTube stream here. You can leave a comment and one of our folks will get back in touch with you. So that's really easy. Jeff, as we do close out, though, we do have a couple more comments that maybe you want to touch on.
Love to, yes. So bring up the chat. Can you bring them on the screen, Jess, so we can address those?
Yeah, so just real quick, and these kind of touch on what Ivelice was talking about. Can an employee get fired if they're scared to go to work, Ivelice?
Technically, yes, they can. And I dealt with a client issue this week. They're actually open and working, and they had an employee where they were concerned for their safety. And mind you, they didn't fall under any of the protected categories of any of the new leaves. But rightfully, can they be fired? Yes. Is it in the best interest of the employer? Probably not. Just because legislation is so quickly evolving. So my recommendation to the client was, you know what? Tell them that they're being put out on an unpaid leave, right? You give them 30 days. This is your unpaid leave, but understand that your job is not guaranteed when you come back. We hope that it'll be available, but it's not. And if you don't come back within the 30 days, then we're going to see it as a voluntary resignation. So now you're removing the pressure as an employer off yourself and trying to remove any liability. And now it's back on the employee, and there's no guarantee of job.
That's good. And then the other one was more of I think, a comment than really a question, but it was, well, as companies decide to have more employees remotely and they save on costs, then there's efficiencies with remote working and less commuting. I think at this point, I think we all agree that there's huge efficiencies. I think we're going to see a large number of businesses adopt this, and
Absolutely.
The commercial real estate market is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, it's been forced on businesses that have been previously hesitant, and now they're seeing that they can still be productive and still run their business with people working from home, even in the middle of the challenges that we have.
It's amazing, Ivelice. We've had so many conversations with business owners where they're like, yeah, this is actually working out really well. I was afraid of it. And Jeff, we've had the comment that we've been far more productive with it, with our conversations and networking in general.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would say for my business, and I almost feel guilty, of course, with so many people out there, literally dying and being, hurt by this disease physically, and then of course financially. My business is actually thriving. I'm getting a lot more time back to back. My virtual assistants are working literally overtime and being well compensated to do so. I'm able to, instead of, just take this as an example, we might have done this in person at a restaurant, with an audience of people in a physical environment at a hotel or a restaurant environment in a private room. And now here we are doing it virtually. We're going to take, a few minutes before the call, 60 minutes, and we're going to end, and there's no drive time. So it saves all of us, maybe an hour or two each to do the exact same type of platform. And now something that we might have done in a restaurant or in a hotel is now being done online and recorded. So maybe it's an even better way of doing things, not just more efficient, but better. I'm getting a lot of new clients who are hiring me literally in the last couple of weeks, who are a couple of them in different scenarios, some of them slowing down a little bit and therefore using the time to work with me as a consultant so that they can ramp back up and be in really strong footing when business starts to boom again. And other clients who are very busy and want to take advantage of the opportunity. Bankruptcy attorneys, for example, litigation attorneys. I work with a lot of law firms as my clients. So there is a lot of efficiency to be gained from this. Let's move towards the wrap up again with you, Ivelice. Just a little reflection on our call today over the last hour, and your thoughts about, how people can get in touch with you, and what should someone listening to this broadcast be thinking about in terms of contacting you?
Sure, absolutely. First, as far as contacting me, my website is hrandbeyond.com. And email is info@hrandbeyond.com. And you can also find us on Facebook and LinkedIn. But, my recommendation is, this really is a time for, especially small and medium-sized businesses, but businesses as a whole, to make sure, similar to what Jess said, that they have the appropriate policies to effectively manage their employees and be in compliance with all of these new legislations that are just coming down the pike. So I can be reached for assistance and supporting. I also support businesses that have small HR teams because I can help augment the support that they don't have, so that they can focus on some of the more strategic issues that they have, and I can deal with some of the more compliance-driven or administrative issues. So if you're small to medium-sized businesses, you don't have the HR support, you don't have access to an attorney, I'm certainly available to provide that support that they need.
Thank you. Moving into last and final comments. Jess, something else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I think this went extremely well. I was really excited to do it. And Ivelice, I appreciate your time on this. I know we had a couple of hiccups. It worked out really well. We had a few comments on YouTube. Most of them were on Facebook, and that was great. The Facebook comments actually show up. The YouTube ones don't. The other thing I want to mention is what I love about this platform and how it differs from that hotel event is that with the last one we did, we had a couple dozen people watch it live, and we had a couple dozen people watching this one live. But we had over 1,300 people watch the recording, and I think that's fantastic. So
Nice.
Excellent. And Ivelice, for you, final thoughts and comments before we finish today.
No, I appreciate the invitation to participate. I think that both, I mean, from the IT perspective and the HR perspective, I think that those are probably one of the two biggest and more relevant topics that are important to business owners. And, you know, the more information that we can share and provide and to help prepare businesses to be successful, because they are really going to need the support and the guidance, you know, the better off our economy and the businesses will be. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. I'm Jeff Tockman. My company's The Referral Navigator. Please reach out to me at 561-755-7764 if you want to talk about growing your business through referrals and business growth. Jess Coburn, thank you so much for being the host and the organizer of this Executive Virtual Roundtable series. And we'll continue to do these every 2 weeks, and we'll create more and more recordings and a catalog of these topics with experts. And of course, today, thank you so much, Ivelice, for being our guest today. It's just amazing the amount of information and experience and knowledge that you have, and the way you're able to convey it so clearly and concisely and in a way that everybody can understand. It is extremely useful. And if a business owner didn't come up with at least one thing to call you about, I think they might have missed some of the broadcast, because there are so many issues where people really should be reaching out to you. Your website's on the screen. Please reach out to Ivelice and have a consultation with her, an initial consultation. Figure out what you can be doing right now to protect your business and to solidify your relationship with your employees, whether they're contractors independently or regular employees. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we will wave and say goodbye. Thanks for coming.
Bye. Thank you.
See you next time.